Stories are very important in this interconnected world because we can't know enough to know the details of everything on which we have to make decisions. But we can know the story that has the value embedded in it. A third principle of connection, if you know your audience to the extent that you're actually entering the world of your audience, and if you have the whole system represented in the room, is to learn to analyze the kind of listening that's going on. What is the kind of listening that is going on? There are 4 kinds of listening. The first kind is not even really listening. It's when you're waiting for the person to finish talking so you can say what you wanted to say anyway. And that's just a matter of looking at your watch and come on, wrap it up. The second kind is when you're listening for the piece that you can get so you can argue against it. You're listening to advantage. The third kind, which is called empathetic listening, is when you stand in the shoes of the other. You listen from where they are. They're speaking, and you try to enter their world, as I was talking about earlier. But there's a fourth kind of listening, which needs to be developed now, and there are many groups all over the world attempting to do this. And when they do, extraordinary things happen. This is a kind of listening that happens in a group where you're listening, and I'm sorry the words aren't developed, you're listening for what wants to emerge. You're not listening for what's the best idea that someone brought in. It's not like brainstorming, which is a very valid and useful exercise. You're not listening for brainstorming the best idea. You're listening for what wants to emerge, that emerges in the room where all of you together have brought all of yourselves and are fully present. And in that moment, amazing things can happen. Great teams have this sometimes on basketball courts, or you see it more often in sports, where suddenly they begin to act as one whole, and that yet they're each individuals. You don't lose your individuality. This is not like the mass herd that you see in animals or you see in crowds that have lost their superegos. This is not that at all. Each person retains their individuality, and the whole becomes something that has never been in existence before. When that happens, amazing things emerge from the group. That fourth type of listening you could call emergent listening. Some of my colleagues and I wrote a book about this called Presence. And Otto Scharmer said, well, it could be mapped along a U, that you begin by observing very closely. And then you come to what we call the bottom of the U. And at this, when you're listening for the future that wants to emerge, solutions or new ideas emerge, and then you have to do rapid prototyping. You can't get it perfect. You create it, see what the world says in response, create it again. We began to look more closely at the bottom of the U, this place of emergent listening, and it turns out to be much more complex, as you would expect, than we had at first thought. For one thing, groups that come together like this, the individuals in it have to be able to leave their egos at the door. They have to be able to leave their egos at the door. We found that groups that performed most spectacularly in these, when we went into companies and so forth, were ones in which it just so happened that everybody in the group either meditated or ran in the morning or had some kind of discipline where they were used to leaving their egos at the door. So they didn't have to be right. They didn't have to have their idea accepted. They didn't have to be affirmed. They didn't have to be shown that they were top of the heap. They could really be one group. There's a lot about that to think about, but it's one of the principles of connection when you're learning to listen. Third, well, if you know about listening, you're also listening for what wants to emerge. So if you do that and you have the whole system in the room, and you're also knowing your interconnectedness, then you come to a place, and this happens fourthly, you come to a place where you don't see lack of connection. I know I'm getting very esoteric here, and I'm not just looking at the front, because they're my people that if their eyes really start to glaze over, I know I'm, because they're the future, and if this doesn't make sense to them, it's hopeless, but it's really important to be able to see the world as interconnected. This is something that happens. It's not that you see a gap that needs to be bridged. You see that the world is already interconnected. This is a kind of shift in seeing. If you see that it's already interconnected, what does it mean then to see in this new way? What does it mean to move from seeing the world as having gaps that need to be bridged to seeing the world as already interconnected, but we have to know that it's interconnected and then work with the interconnections? So that's a slight shift. It's related to a peculiar thing that I discovered. Every time I met someone who was truly a saintly person, a Mother Teresa type, every time I would meet someone like that, they would be truly humble. And you'd say, well, of course, that goes along with saintliness. You know, you're humble. It wasn't like that. They truly did not see themselves as special. They truly did not. They saw this goodness that was in themselves, in everyone. So it was as if what they saw in the world was so real that when they were humble, it wasn't like putting on a persona. It was truly what they saw. So there was a way in which they were telling the truth when they would say, I'm no better than anyone else, you know, or whatever their humility, whatever form their humility took. It's an astounding kind of thing. When you take the energy that is there and move it into interconnectedness, this is one of the things that happens. You have a phenomenon a little like what happened with Roy Spence's Don't Mess with Texas, GSD&M's Don't Mess with Texas campaign. You're familiar with that when you're in this area and you're in communications. But the way that worked was that we had a God-given right to throw our beer bottles out of our pickup trucks here in Texas. And the litter on the highway literally costs millions to clean up every year. And so this overnight, this ad campaign, which was named the best ad campaign of the 20th century, almost overnight helped that problem enormously. And all it did was take that energy we have in Texas, don't mess with me, and turn it in a new direction. Don't mess with Texas. Don't litter. Don't mess with Texas. It wasn't that we went against the individuality of what Texas is. We didn't say, okay, Texas, be nice like, I don't know, Delaware or Iowa. I don't know. What? I suddenly couldn't think, okay, be nice like. I couldn't come up with a state. But, you know, we didn't say be nice like, change who you are. No, we have this attitude. That's who we are. It said take this attitude and turn it in a different way. And connect with the world, see this connection where the litter is connecting with Texas and it's messing with Texas, and stand for Texas. Stand for Texas with the same oomph with which you stand for yourself. So you have that energy of the individuality, say, of Texas. I'm just using that as an example. But you turn it in a different direction when you see the interconnectedness of things. This is a move, and I'm using that example because it's not spiritual, it's not, you know, this is a move you can make in any domain, whether it's personal with your son who has a monster in the closet, it's an ad campaign, it's working with nonprofits. It's a move that you can make in any domain if you see the connections that are already there. So what I'm saying about bridging the gap, there already is a bridge. In fact, if you look more closely, there's not even a gap. There's not even a gap.